hallway. We traded phone numbers, and if he was to wake up early in the morning on Sunday morning and was sick, if he'd call me, I'll teach this class, and then when y'all leave, I'd stay in here and teach his. So he will do the same thing for me. If I got up on Sunday morning, rather than call Joe Beth or Doris or Charlie or somebody or Ken and say, you need to teach this morning, they didn't have time to prepare a lesson, all I do is text him. Instead of going to church at 9:30, he'll come in, teach the same lesson, and he'll teach it, and then stay in here and teach his. So it's a real nice deal. So the first time he texted me, I missed it because he texted 10 minutes till 9, and we don't normally bring the phone in the classroom. So now I have to bring it in case that happens on there, but it's on vibrate. So if my leg starts jumping like that, that's the phone vibrating over here. But I thought that's a real good mix because I'd asked Joe Beth to have a lesson prepared and on hold in case something like this come up. And it still could happen. I mean, he could say, well, I'm not teaching, today or whatever. So Joe Beth is also holding one in reserve that at the last minute she could pull it back up and do it. We need to do that. So we got preparation, don't we?
Sure do.
We're prepared.
Precious.
Now we're going to continue in our study on Joshua here. And some of you look like you're asleep. I need to wake you up. So what do these people have in common?
Accused of sex.
Huh?
Accused of sex harassment.
Sexual harassment? Anybody else? Got anything to say about these pictures? Why are they all grouped together, these people?
Judgment Day is coming.
Judgment Day is coming? That's a good one. What comes to your mind when you see those pictures of these
They're
people?
all high, they're high profile, they're very well known.
High profile people. Marcia?
I said they're too big for their britches.
Too big for their britches, yeah.
Power.
Huh?
Abuse of power.
Abuse of power. That's a good one. Y'all like that?
That's good.
Yeah, it's a good one. Anybody else? Come on. The longer you look at it, something pops into your mind.
Well, there's Papa George.
Yeah, George is down there. Why did you single him out of all those people?
Well, they did say something that he did one time, but I don't know. I don't think he's in that class.
I think I would single him out because among all of those people, he's the one that held the highest position.
Yeah,
Yeah.
One that you would expect the most of.
yeah.
Most.
Would he be the one maybe you least expected to have his picture included in those kind of? Ernest?
You can't hide your sins, they'll catch up with you eventually.
Yeah, that's very good. Your sins are gone. You may have covered them up for 50 years and all of a sudden here they are. Your sins are known. Yes?
Where's Bill Clinton?
This is not an all-inclusive list. We didn't have a TV screen big enough. And if we did, you know what? All of our pictures would be on there too. Oh, we don't have we don't have any sins?
No, but
We don't have any sin?
that's all the same kind. They're
Oh.
all the same kind. I mean, I don't mean,
Are their sins bigger than our sins?
no, they're not. No, but
In the eyes of God, they're not. In the eyes of the public, they are. Just like there's a bigger punishment for murder than there is for shoplifting in there. So there is a bigger sin, and it runs with the punishment that goes with it. But these share a common thread in the public today, don't they? And that's why those are in there. In fact, I pasted a couple of them in there and covered up a couple of them that weren't as well known. But
it was like when George Bush said that he touched someone's behind. Well, I can tell you, when you're around all that crowds and all, you're going to be touching somebody where you don't want to.
okay. Which ones are guilty and which ones are innocent?
It's not ours to choose.
George?
I say only they and the person that they touched or whatever and God are the only ones that know for sure.
For sure. It's a good answer.
Well, I mean, some of us said they did it, so
Yeah.
they did.
Yeah, some admitted it. Yeah. Sometimes we decide that people are guilty without knowing all the facts. Especially if we don't like them. And then we often decide that others are innocent because we like them and we don't want to believe that they're guilty. See, we don't want to really believe George Bush is guilty. We just, you know, as a human being, that one kind of touches us. You hate for him to be up there. But you have to be realistic. Okay? You can't jump to conclusions and say this one's guilty and this one's not. You just can't do that. We know the rule, innocent until proven guilty. Yet we still sometimes make hasty decisions about people without always knowing the true details. Doesn't that happen? We form opinions sometimes. You know, if it's somebody we don't like, yeah, he's guilty. And if it's somebody we like, you know, well, maybe not. Maybe they're not guilty. That's human nature. That's life. That's kind of the way we are when we come into this. How often do we jump to conclusions and we make bad decisions because we don't take the time to get all the information or the correct information? Sometimes we move so quickly, we didn't really think it through. We didn't check it out. I got an email from PayPal. They told me my account is at risk, that I need to go in and update it. So just click right here and go in and update it. You never click on there. If it was really PayPal, they would say, go to my site and log in the proper way and do it, see? So you got to be slow to react, to be sure you're thinking things through. But like this says, sometimes we jump to conclusions. Where's that phrase come from? Anybody know, jump to conclusions? Anybody know where that phrase come from? I saw one article on it. It said it came from people that used to read books. And they would read the first chapter or two, so, oh, I know what's going to happen. So they would jump to the end of the book and read the conclusion and never read the middle. I did that all the way through school. That's the way I read my books. I read the opening and I read the closing and I did my book report. I hate to read. I don't read well. I read slow. I turned 3 pages and don't know what I read because I was thinking about something else. I'm a poor reader. So jumping to conclusions came from people that used to read a book, and they said, and that's where that phrase comes from, they jumped to the conclusion and they read it. But you know what? They didn't get all the facts, did they? They didn't get everything in between. Yes?
You know, I'm not saying that the women don't have a right to wear anything they want to, you know, within reason. But there's a lot of times that the women are instigating some of these problems as well. You know, it's not all men.
No doubt, yeah. And what we're going to talk about is not to judge whether they're innocent or guilty at this point. We'll leave that to the courts and the lawyers and everybody else. But what we do want to talk about today, we're going to see Joshua had a similar experience about judging people too quickly or making decisions too quickly. Jumping to conclusions can get you in trouble. You don't want to jump too fast. Ernest got a smile on his face, so this is going to be good, I'm sure.
But if one of our members of our class hug another one, we gotta have a witness for protection.
We have to have what?
A witness for protection.
For protection?
Yeah, in case one of them says something about the other one.
Oh, yeah, okay, all right. All right, in Joshua chapter 22, we're going to see a good example of this jumping to conclusion. Well, maybe it's a bad example of it, but it's an example of. We'll leave off the good and bad about jumping to conclusions. So you can look at that list up there, and I like it because she said she felt bad, Pat did, because George's picture was up there. We all do. We just hate that, you know. And somebody else's picture up there, Charles Manson, who died recently, if his picture was up there, you'd say, yeah, he's guilty. And then poor old George, you feel bad for him. You say, I wish he wasn't. I wish his picture wasn't in there. You may not be forming an opinion. You may not be judging. You may not be coming to a conclusion. But in your heart, you're like, oh, I feel bad that he's up there. I wish he wasn't. So this is what we're talking about, just jumping to examples. I want you to watch as we go through chapter 22 in Joshua now to see an example of this jumping to conclusion. Now, it's always hard when you have a continuous point that God told Joshua that he was getting old. That could have been your doctor.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought.
Even God does that, so it's okay. And that the Israelites had conquered the majority of Canaan, and now they were in possession of the promised land. Doesn't mean they conquered everything. God told Joshua to divide up the land and give each tribe their inheritance as commanded by Moses. There was still much land to be conquered, but it would be the responsibility of each tribe to drive out the inhabitants in their allotted territory. The tribe of Levi was not given an inheritance like the other tribes. Instead, the Levites were given 48 cities and pasture land around those cities, just outside the city. God also selected 6 cities out of these 48 to be cities of refuge. Now it's time for Joshua to disband his army, the Israelite army, and it's time to send the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh back across the Jordan River to the east side, because you remember, they asked for some land over there. Let me show you as a reminder. You notice that the 2 1/2 tribes that settled on the east side of the Jordan, first there was Manasseh, we call him the half-tribe because half of Manasseh went over to the west side. And there was the tribe of Gad and the tribe of Reuben. Now, they were still required to go with Joshua and the other tribes into the promised land and conquer Canaan. Now, the Israelite army of Joshua at this point is now being disbanded. They were to send these 3 tribes back home. They did their duty. They came over, they served, they helped the others, and he's saying, you can go back home now. So this is where we'll start reading in the scriptures today. First, listen to what Joshua has to say to these 2 1/2 tribes. That's where we're going to work first. Read first. Then Joshua summoned the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half a tribe of Manasseh, and he said to them, you have done all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded, and you have obeyed me in everything that I commanded. For a long time now, to this very day, you have not deserted your fellow Israelites, but you have carried out the mission of the Lord your God, that one he gave you. Now the Lord your God has given them rest as he promised. Return to your homes that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you on the other side of the Jordan. But be very careful to keep the commandments and the laws that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you, to love the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, to keep his commands, to hold fast to him, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. So he's saying you can go back, but don't forget these commands to obey the Lord. Then Joshua blessed them and he sent them away, and they went to their homes. And when Joshua sent them home, he blessed them with this saying. He said, return to your homes with your great wealth, with large herds of livestock, with silver, gold, bronze, and iron, and a great quantity of clothing, and divide the plunder from your enemies with your fellow servants. What did he just tell them? In your words? What did Joshua tell them to do?
Go
home and share.
Yeah, take what you plunder that you've got. God would tell them when they could take the plunder and when they couldn't. And when he says you can take the plunder, he says, now take what you have and take it back and share it with all the people on the east side over there in these 3 tribes. So the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh left the Israelites at Shiloh in Canaan to return to Gilead, their own land, which they had acquired in accordance with the command of the Lord through Moses. So the land that they possessed on the east side, it was given to them by God. It was okay. He gave them that land. Was that part of the original promised land? No. But he allowed them to have that. Now verse 9 tells us that these 2 1/2 tribes had left Shiloh. And Shiloh is located just north of Jerusalem. And they were headed to Gilead on the east side of the Jordan River. Now, Gilead was not a city. It's a region. It's an area that encompassed many cities over there. It's on the east side of the Jordan. You remember they said Jesus was from Nazareth of Galilee. Galilee is not a city. Galilee is an area. Jerusalem is a city, and it's in the southern part. It's in Judea. Judea is a region, not a city. So this area it's talking about, Gilead, is an area over on the east side. Nobody knows exactly the boundaries. Now, when they came to Geliloth, now I had to put the pronunciation in there because they had about 3 different ones. Geliloth, near the Jordan in the land of Canaan, the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half tribe of Manasseh built, and it says imposing altar. In the New International Version, the NIV Bible, it says imposing altar. But if you go back and get the King James Version, the word imposing is not there. And it's the older version of nearly all of these. So I don't know why they stuck in imposing. I don't think it has a place there, but since some of you use the NIV, I didn't want to blank it out. But the fact is that when they got to Geliloth, with this, it was an area just before you got to the Jordan. They haven't crossed the Jordan to go home yet. They stopped, and it says they built an altar. And when the Israelites heard that they had built this altar at the border of Canaan and Geliloth, near the Jordan, on the Israelite side of the Jordan River, the whole assembly of Israel gathered at Shiloh to go to war with them. They thought, we're sending these 2.5 tribes back over to the other side of the Jordan, that's okay. But before they crossed the Jordan, they stopped and built an altar. Now, when we're saying an altar is built where you have a fire and you sacrifice. That's an altar. Okay? When the Israelites first came from the east side of Jordan and they crossed the Jordan River, remember the priests carried the Ark of the Covenant, and as soon as their feet got in the waters moved back, they were on dry land. After everybody got through, God said, take one man from each tribe, go back down into the Jordan River on dry, pick up a stone and bring them back. We're going to stack them up for a memorial. That's not an altar, that's a memorial, okay? What kind of stone did they pick up? Did they pick up a little pebble?
No.
How do you know?
Had to carry it on their shoulder.
Because they said you have to carry it on your shoulder, so we know that big. We know it can't be too terribly big, because too big they couldn't put it on their shoulder. It gives you an idea. But the point is that was done, and they set that up for a memorial, so when the kids and the grandkids said, what is that for? And said, oh, that's when God led us across the Jordan River. It's a memorial. Well, what was being built here was not a memorial, it was an altar. And it made the Israelites mad. Now, Geliloth was also a region and not a city. This was an area that spread basically from Gilgal to Jerusalem. They don't know the borders, but that was that area right there. So somewhere right in that area, but that's about the same area where they came across in the first place. Remember, they came across and encamped at Gilgal. These 2.5 tribes had stopped just before crossing the Jordan while still on the west side of the Jordan, and they built this altar. So why is building an altar so offensive to the 9.5 tribes that are over here on the west side? Why were these Israelites ready to go to war with the tribes that had built this altar? Any thoughts?
Well, it's because the altar was supposed to be in Jerusalem. That was the altar for sacrifice.
Okay, you're going too far ahead. We hadn't got to Jerusalem. Where was it? When the altar in Jerusalem, where was it in Jerusalem? In what? The temple? It's in the temple. Altar now, at this time.
The ark, I guess.
Shiloh. It's at Shiloh. We read that about 3 Sundays ago, that the tabernacle, which is a portable temple, if you will, it has the altar, and that was taken to Shiloh. So the altar is in Shiloh at this point. All right? God had told the Israelites that they were to only offer sacrifices to Him at the tabernacle, which was now permanently located in the city of Shiloh, and they were to never offer sacrifices to other gods. Now, there were some exceptions to the rule, but God made the exceptions. You may think of one. When he told Abraham to go up on top of Mount Murrell and take his son for a sacrifice, that was not the tabernacle. So there's some exceptions where God named them. But just for regular purposes, God said you will only sacrifices are done on the altar that's in the tabernacle, which later became the temple in Jerusalem on here. So these people were getting upset. They're thinking, well, what are they building an altar for? They're not supposed to be doing that. Now the Israelites did not know for sure who this altar was built for, did they? At this point, there's no indication they knew. They just heard they built an altar. Not a memorial of 12 stones stacked up like they did when they crossed the first time, but an altar for putting a fire and there and burning and offering sacrifices. Since the Israelites were only to sacrifice on the altar at Shiloh, they must have assumed that the altar was for a pagan god, and that's why they were so mad. These 2.5 tribes are going back, and they stopped on our side of the Jordan River. Can you believe that? And they're building an altar, and they're going to do sacrifices. Jump to conclusion here. Let's jump to the conclusion that it's for a pagan god. That's what they did, didn't they? They're saying it's for a pagan god. Do you think they might have jumped to a conclusion without really knowing all the facts? It appears that this is what happened. They were ready to fight first and ask questions later. A life application. How often do we do the same thing? Why do we form opinions immediately without gathering all the facts? I put these pictures of these men up there, and you may not say it in the class, and I wouldn't, but we might have some opinion. Oh, I think that guy's guilty, but I don't know. I don't think he is. We don't have all the facts. We don't know, so we don't need to jump to opinions without it. It is because we like to assume, look at this, the worst about people we don't like. And we want to assume the best for the people we do like. I think that's human nature, isn't it? You look at that and you say, oh, I wish George Bush's picture with him. And you look at somebody else, I don't care about him. You know, it's just human nature we have. But we can't just let our opinions go and based on no real facts, no truth, as Donald Trump would say, fake news sometimes. Why do we do this? Why do we do this? I think the answer to that is it's kind of human nature, but we have to watch ourselves and be careful about jumping to conclusions. Yes?
I think part of the reason we have a basis, a kind of basis in us. We like a person for what they have represented to us before because they stand for something or believe something that we believe. We believe them to be a good person, and that's why we like them. Mm-hmm. And those that we think are really not very nice people, we don't like them because of that. And so we're ready to credit something negative to
I think that's a good word you chose to say. We're ready. We're ready to believe anything bad about this person.
Yes.
And we're hoping to believe anything good that's said about this person. Yeah, I think that happens, and yet we don't know all the facts sometimes, but we want it to fall okay here, and we don't care if it falls bad for this person on here. So, yeah, I think it's kind of natural. Yeah, it hurt me to see George Bush's picture come up with those things like that. You know. Now let's go back to the Israelites. Now the Israelites had been through something similar to this before. Now, so what I got to do is I got to take you back. Before they crossed the Jordan River, when we were way back there, the first part of the book of Joshua, they were camped on the east side at a place called Shittim. I know you don't like that word, but that's the way it's pronounced. I'm sorry. Can't get around it. Let's read in Numbers, the book of Numbers, back in chapter 25, and it's going to take us back to an event that's similar that happened back there before they come to the promised land. Now, what that means is that this event is still in the minds of those people when they see this altar being built now. That's what this is for. So we go back to Numbers and we read, and it says, while Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with the Moabite women, who invited them to the sacrifices of their gods. The people ate the sacrificial meal and bowed down before these gods, little g, plural. So Israel yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor, and the Lord's anger burned against them. Now this Peor, they don't know everything about that, but first of all, there was a mountain, Mount Peor, and then it had a lot of places on there they worship Baal on this mountain. So that area around there was called Peor. So if you say they're worshiping Baal of Peor, then it just happened to be in that area over here versus somewhere else on here. And there's also some indication that a lot of these false gods had relatives, you know, like in mythology, and that Peor was maybe a relative of one of the goddess. And so I really think it has more to do, it's the area, Mount Peor, that they worship Baal, because it's on that side of the river over there where these people are at this point. Now the Lord said to Moses, look at this, all the leaders of these people and kill them and expose them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the Lord's fierce anger may turn away from Israel. What does that mean? You read that sentence, what did he say? What did God say in your words?
I'll forgive you if you follow my commands to destroy.
But he says, kill the leaders of these people that did these things. Not just the people, kill the leaders. Whoa! And he says, do it out in public so we can see them. Why? He says, so that the Lord's fierce anger may turn away. It could have said, from the rest of Israel, if you follow through and do what I told you to do. So Moses said to Israel's judges, now he appointed judges out there because he couldn't handle all of this himself, and God told him how to do this. Each of you must put to death those of your people who have yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor. Then an Israelite man, this guy had nerves, then an Israelite man brought into the camp a Midianite woman right before the eyes of Moses and the whole assembly of Israel, while they were weeping at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Tent of meeting is inside the tabernacle. It's the tent that is the holy place. And there's about 4 pronunciations of this one priest here. Phanesis was one of them, and Phineas was another one. So I may say it one way one time, one way another time. Phineas was, I had always said it before, he was the son of Eleazar, who was the son of Aaron. And Aaron was the first high priest. And so the priest saw this Phineas, and he left the assembly. He took a spear in his hand, and he followed the Israelite into the tent, and he drove the spear into both of them, right through the Israelite man and into the woman's stomach. Then the plague against the Israelites were stopped, but those who died in the plague were 24,000. It didn't tell us there was a plague, but when you read this last sentence, was there a plague? Yeah. Here is this same priest, Phineas, whichever you pronounce his name. He's a priest, and he was there when that took place on the east side of the Jordan before they crossed over. And now we've conquered all this land. These tribes are going back, and oh no, here's another altar that's being built, and he's seeing this whole thing come flashing back again. See? So what do you think he's thinking? Here we go again, maybe. The Lord had said to Moses, Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, has turned my anger away from the Israelites, since he was zealous for my honor among them. I did not put an end to them in my zeal. In other words, because the high priest did what he was ordered to do in killing these people, then God says, I'll turn away from killing everybody. Therefore, tell him I am making my covenant of peace with him. He and his descendants will have a covenant of a lasting priesthood because he was zealous for the honor of his God and he made atonements for the Israelites. So, now this high priest was not going to let history repeat itself. We're back now where we were in Joshua chapter 22. This time, he's taking leaders from each of the 9.5 tribes from the west side of Jordan, and they're going to go investigate first before allowing war to break out. He would investigate first before taking action. So I'm telling you what we're about to read. So the Israelites sent Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the priest, to the land of Gilead, to Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. He had to go over there. After they built the tribe, they'd already gone home. He's going over there, and he's going to confront the leaders of these 3 tribes. With him, they sent 10 of the chief men, one from each of these tribes. 9.5, so they couldn't send half a man, so they sent 10. 10 people going up. Everybody got that? So, okay, 10 people went with him over there, one from each of the tribes of Israel, each the head of a family division among the Israelite clans. Now, when they went to Gilead, to Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, they said, the whole assembly of the Lord says, how could you break faith with the God of Israel like this? How could you turn away from the Lord and build yourselves an altar in rebellion against him now? Was not the sin of Peor enough for us? That's why we went back and read that, so you know what that was. Haven't we done this once before? Up to this very day, we have not cleansed ourselves from that sin, even though a plague fell on the community of the Lord. And are you now turning away from this Lord? This is confronting these 3 tribes. If you rebel against the Lord today, tomorrow he'll be angry with the whole community of Israel. If the land you possess is defiled, come over to the Lord's land where the Lord's tabernacle stands and share the land with us. But do not rebel against the Lord or against us by building an altar for yourselves other than the altar of the Lord our God. When Achan, the son of Zerah, was unfaithful in regard to the devoted things, did not wrath come to the whole community of Israel? He was not the only one who died for his sin. We had read that earlier. And there, it seems that Phinehas, the priest, started right in on the leaders of these 3 tribes, condemning them before he let them state their case, didn't he? You see how tough he is on them? Now let's read the response of what these men from these 2.5 tribes say back to the high priest about this. And then Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh replied to the heads of the clan of Israel. The mighty one, God the Lord, the mighty one, God the Lord, he knows, and let Israel know, if this has been in rebellion or disobedience to the Lord, do not spare us today. No, he said, go ahead and kill us. If we have built our own altar to turn away from the Lord and to offer burnt offerings and grain offerings, or to sacrifice fellowship offerings on it, may the Lord himself call us to an account. No, we did it for fear that someday your descendants might say to us, that's the ones on the west, might say to these 2.5 on the east, what do you have to do with the Lord God of Israel? They're on the other side of the Jordan. The Lord has made the Jordan a boundary between us and you. You Reubenites and Gadites, you have no share in the Lord. So your descendants might cause ours to stop fearing the Lord. That is why we said, let us get ready and build an altar, but not for burnt offerings or sacrifices. That's an important sentence. What does that mean? They were really trying to build a memorial, but they built it like an altar for burning and offering sacrifices. On the contrary, it is to be a witness between us and you and the generations that follow that we will worship the Lord in his sanctuary with our burnt offerings and sacrifices and fellowship offerings. Then in the future, your descendants will not be able to say up to ours, you have no share in the Lord. And we said, if they ever say this to us, or to our descendants, we will answer, look at this replica of the Lord's altar, which our ancestors built for burnt offerings and sacrifices, not for that, but for a witness between you and us. Far be it from us to rebel against the Lord and turn away from Him today by building an altar for burnt offerings, grain offerings, sacrifices, other than the altar of the Lord our God that stands before His tabernacle. So now there's the response. What was their response, in your words?
Innocent.
Huh?
We're innocent of the charge.
Yeah, what you're saying, that was not the reason we built it. We did not build it to make actual sacrifices. We built it really as a memorial so that when the children and grandchildren on the west side of the Jordan see that, they will know that's the contact between those on the other side that said, we made this memorial. You remember, we are part of you, even though we're on the other side of the river.
Wallace,
Yeah.
what's the difference in building a memorial and a altar in this
Well,
case?
memorial has nothing to do with an altar. Memorial, you just stack some rocks together, and so the kids would come up and say, why do we have this big pile of rocks and there's 12 of them? Say, oh, that's at Gilgal. That's to remind us that when God parted the waters and let us across, that's what it's for. It's a memorial to remind. Now, the altar is when you go to sacrifice an animal for forgiveness of sins.
Right.
There's grain offerings. It's like giving your first 10%.
But isn't it built out of rocks too?
Yes, it is.
So
But
that's
it's
why-
built with a fire pit in it so that they burn
Okay.
and they actually have it. So a stack of rocks are built with fire in a place up there where you slaughter the animal and can burn it. That's an altar.
That's what I thought.
So they built it in the shape of the altar. If they would have built it with a stack of rocks, they would never have this confrontation, would they? But I don't know why they chose to build it that way. But they did. They didn't build it, according to the scriptures, with any intentions to really sacrifice anything on it. They didn't do that. Yeah, Arnie.
It was just built to get their attention.
He built it to get their attention, yeah. But he needed it for the attention of the kids and the grandkids, because the current generation knows that those on the east side of the Jordan River are part of us. They know that. But by the time you get down to the grandchildren and the children of those, they're going to say, well, what do they have to do where the promised land's over here? And the altar, they were hoping, would serve as a memorial, as a reminder to say, remember, we were over here, we helped fight. We built this as a reminder before we went back home. It says, when Phinehas the priest and the leaders of the community and the heads of the clans of Israel heard what Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh had to say, they were pleased. So the priest with the 10 leaders that he brought over, I'm sure they had a sigh of relief. And Phinehas the son of Eleazar the priest said to Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, today we know that the Lord is with us because you have not been unfaithful to the Lord in this matter. He got the facts. But remember, that priest, he kind of jumped on them hard in the beginning, didn't he? And now he's got the facts and everything's turned around again, okay? He says, now you have rescued the Israelites from the Lord's hands. We could have been punished for doing a bad thing, but you settled it. Then Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the priest, and the leaders returned to Canaan on the west side from their meeting with the Reubenites, the Gadites, and Gilead, and they reported to the Israelites. They were glad to hear the report, and they praised God, because now they didn't have to go to war. And the Reubenites and the Gadites gave the altar this name. They gave it a new name. There's the name. A witness between us that the Lord is God. So it kind of makes more sense. But remember, they just saw it was an altar, and they jumped to the conclusion that they were building an altar to worship other gods before. Isn't it interesting how people can misinterpret the words or actions of others? These eastern tribes were not building an altar for sacrifice. They were actually building a memorial. It's a big difference between the two, and you brought it up, and that was good, Doris. Just think, they almost went to war with their own people because they jumped to a conclusion, or they made an assumption without gathering all their facts. So what did we learn from the lesson today? Don't jump to conclusions without all the facts. Don't judge people too quickly. Learn to give people the benefit of the doubt. Everything you hear is not always the truth. somebody said, yeah, but it was on Facebook.
Said hi as you passed me by, and you didn't even smile, so I'm sure the reason why is that you must be mad at me. I saw a bird whispering to Kurt, and I bet they were whispering about my shirt. Hey, tell me what else could it be? There's a lot of possibilities. Watch out, or you will be jumping to conclusions, yeah. Believing in illusions, adding more confusion. That's what you do when you jump into conclusions. Lenore said that I can't draw, so I'm never ever gonna try to draw anymore. It must be true, she was so sure. Lately you and Jeremy spend lots of time together, well, what about me? You must not like me anymore. There's a lot of possibilities. Watch out, or you will be jumping to conclusions, yeah.
There was much more, but I cut it short.
That sounded like.
Where'd you find that song?
I worked to find stuff. Jumping to conclusions. Thank you, Charlie, I told Charlie before we started, and Nick, that the lesson was kind of long today. Don't cut anybody short on prayer requests, we don't want to do that, but they sped it up to give you time to get the whole lesson in. There's a lot in today's lesson for you to take home and for me to take home with us. We do jump to conclusions, sometimes we don't get all the facts. And they almost had a war, Israel against Israel, because somebody was going to jump to conclusions to get the flat facts straight on that. Let's have a closing prayer. Father, we thank you for the time we've shared. We thank you